The client growth department had spent weeks waiting for one name. For 3 years in a row, Jenny had been Golden Phoenix's top seller. She had brought in more revenue than anyone else in the department, helped recover failing accounts, and spent nearly 10 years building her career inside the company. Most people around her had already decided what the announcement would be. Only a few days earlier, coworkers had stopped by Jenny's desk to tell her the position was hers. One had already suggested where they should celebrate. Another joked about how strange it would feel to call her the boss. Then David stood in front of the department and announced the new head of client growth, Adam. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then the applause started. The same people who had spent the previous week telling Jenny nobody deserved the position more than she did moved toward Adam. One congratulated him on a well-earned promotion. Another said the department needed someone with his vision. Within minutes, people were speaking as if the decision had always been obvious. Adam had been in the department for 3 months. He was also the son of Tom, the chairman of Golden Phoenix. Jenny stood away from the crowd. 10 years of work, 3 consecutive years as the company's top seller. And the position had gone to a man who had been there for 90 days. She walked over to David and asked if she could leave early. He looked at her. "You're not staying for the celebration?" "I'm not feeling well." David knew why she wanted to leave. Before Jenny walked away, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Keep working hard. You were unlucky this time. I'm sure you'll get another chance." Jenny picked up her things and left. On the way home, she stopped for fried chicken and bought beer for herself and Derek. When she opened the apartment door, Derek looked at the bags in her hands. "So?" Jenny placed the food on the table. "Bad luck this time," Derek watched her. "Next time?" Jenny opened one of the containers. Next time, they sat down and ate together. Jenny talked about everything except Golden Phoenix. 10 years earlier, Jenny was 18 years old. She lived with her parents and her 13-year-old brother, Derek, in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. Derek had been unable to walk since childhood. He could move around the house on his own and hated asking for help, but stairs, transportation, and many ordinary tasks were still difficult for him. Most of the time, Jenny was the one who helped. Their parents had stopped taking responsibility for either of them years earlier. Money came into the house and disappeared just as quickly. Sometimes it was lost in card games. Other times it went into bets that were supposed to recover whatever had been lost the week before. When their parents won, they stayed out longer. When they lost, they came home angry. Jenny learned not to ask which one had happened. At 18, she took whatever work she could find. She cleared tables at a diner, stocked shelves when a local store needed extra help, and picked up short shifts wherever someone was willing to pay her. She kept part of every paycheck hidden before bringing the rest home. The hidden money paid for groceries, Derek's school expenses, and the things their parents always promised to buy later. One evening, Jenny came home carrying a takeout box the diner had allowed her to keep after her shift. Derek was sitting alone at the kitchen table with a school book open in front of him. "You ate?" she asked. "Yeah." Jenny opened the refrigerator. A bottle of water, half a carton of milk, and a jar of mustard sat inside. She looked back at him. Derek lowered his eyes to the book. Jenny put the takeout box in front of him. "I'm not hungry." "Neither am I," he looked at her. They both knew she was lying. Jenny pulled out the chair across from him and waited until he opened the box. Later that night, she went into her bedroom and checked the envelope hidden behind a loose panel in the closet. The money was still there. She had been saving it for months, a few dollars at a time. Derek was getting older. Soon, he would need more than food and school supplies, and Jenny knew their parents would not suddenly become people she could depend on. She counted the bills, returned the envelope to its hiding place, and pushed the panel back into position. A few days later, Jenny came home and knew someone had been in her room. The closet door was open. The loose panel had been moved. The envelope was gone. She found her father in the living room and asked where the money was. He did not bother denying it. Most of it had already been lost. Jenny asked how much was left. Her father told her to lower her voice. She asked again. He reminded her that she lived under his roof and that money earned by anyone in the family belonged to the family. Jenny looked at her mother. Her mother had heard everything, but she kept her eyes on the television. "That money wasn't yours," her father stood. "You want to say that again?" Jenny did. The argument brought Derek out of his room. He stopped near the hallway and asked what was happening. Their father told him to go back. Derek stayed where he was. When their father moved toward him, Jenny stepped between them. For years, she had dealt with one problem at a time. If there was no food, she bought food. If Derek needed something for school, she worked another shift. If her parents found money, she hid the next amount somewhere else. But the envelope had taken months to fill and only one afternoon to disappear. Jenny finally understood that working harder would never solve the real problem. As long as they stayed in that house, anything she built could be taken from them. That night, she waited until the house was quiet. Then she pulled 2 bags from the closet and began packing. Derek watched her from the doorway. "What are you doing? Take what you need. Where are we going?" "Columbus." Derek stared at her. "Tonight?" Jenny folded another shirt and put it into his bag. Before they wake up, he looked toward the hallway, then back at her. "What if we can't make it?" Jenny stopped for a moment. She had no answer that would make either of them feel better. "Then we'll figure out what comes next." They left before sunrise. Jenny carried the bags. Derek carried what he could. She had very little money left, no apartment waiting for them, and no job in the city. She only knew she was not taking him back. The first months in Columbus were harder than Jenny had expected. The cheapest room she could find was in an old building, far from most of the places where she found work. It was small enough that Derek's mobility became another problem they had to solve. Jenny moved furniture, cleared space, and arranged the room so he could get around without needing her every time he wanted something. Then she started taking the first jobs that would hire her. Some mornings she cleaned offices before the employees arrived. On other days, she worked at a diner. For a while, she stocked shelves late at night and came home after Derek was already asleep. The jobs changed whenever she found better hours or slightly better pay. The routine did not. Rent came first, then food, then transportation and whatever Derek needed for school. Jenny kept what was left. Usually, there was not much. One winter evening, she returned from work and found Derek at the table with several bills spread in front of him. He had separated them into small piles. "I think we're short." Jenny put down her bag and checked the numbers. He was right. The heating bill had been higher than expected. The next morning, she asked for extra shifts. That became the pattern of those first 2 years. When something cost more, Jenny worked more. She never went to college. Stopping work for 4 years was not something she could even consider. But she also began to understand that surviving from one paycheck to the next would eventually become its own trap. She could keep adding hours, but there were only so many hours in a day. The first real change came through one of Jenny's ordinary jobs. She had been hired to handle basic customer inquiries for a small local business. Her job was simple: answer questions, record information, and pass difficult customers to someone above her. Jenny started noticing patterns. Some customers were not actually angry about the price. They were confused. Others were ready to buy but kept asking the same question because nobody had answered it clearly. A few simply wanted someone to remember what they had already explained during the previous call. Jenny began keeping better notes. She changed the order in which she asked questions. Instead of trying to sell immediately, she first found out why the customer had called. The results were small at first. Fewer people asked for a manager. More customers completed their purchases instead of saying they would think about it. Then people began asking for Jenny when they called back. Her manager started sending difficult cases to her. One afternoon, a customer who had already decided to cancel was transferred to Jenny. She spent several minutes going through what had happened, found the problem, and offered a different option. The customer stayed. A week later, the same customer bought an additional service. Jenny began paying attention to more than the conversation itself. She wanted to know why some people returned while others disappeared, why one offer worked and another did not, and why businesses spent so much effort finding new customers while barely keeping track of the ones they already had. For the first time, she saw a skill she might be able to build a future around. Jenny began studying after work. Without a college degree, she knew a hiring manager would have little reason to take a chance on her resume. She took online courses in sales, customer relationship management, and digital marketing, then worked toward professional certifications she could show employers. The process took nearly 2 years. Some nights she studied for hours. Other weeks she barely opened a course because rent was due and she had taken extra shifts. She did not turn those 2 years into a perfect routine. She studied when she could, worked when she had to, and kept returning to the same goal whenever life interrupted it. During that time, Derek also started finding small jobs he could do from home. The money was not much, but he saved part of it and one evening tried to give Jenny his share of the month's expenses. Jenny pushed it back across the table. "Keep it. You've been paying for everything, and you've got a life to build. So do you." Jenny looked at the money, then at him. "Save it. Maybe one day you'll need it when you get married," Derek started to argue. Jenny had already stood up and carried her plate to the sink. The discussion was over. By 20, Jenny had completed the certifications she had been working toward. She began applying for entry-level positions in sales and client services. Most companies never called. The few that did saw the same resume. No college degree, no formal corporate experience. Years of work that proved she could survive but did little to impress a hiring manager. Jenny kept applying. She changed her resume, practiced interviews, and sent another application whenever a rejection arrived. Then Golden Phoenix called. The company was already well established in Columbus. It helped small and regional businesses attract customers, improve sales, and grow their accounts. Jenny knew the position was not the kind of job people bragged about. She would start at the bottom of the client growth department, handling basic support work for people with more experience, better resumes, and higher titles. The pay was modest. The title meant almost nothing. During the interview, Jenny was asked whether she would be comfortable starting in a role below the level she hoped to reach. She answered yes. She had spent 2 years trying to get through the first door. She was not going to turn away because the door opened at the bottom. Golden Phoenix hired her. 2 years after leaving home with Derek and 2 bags, Jenny walked into the company for her first day of work. She had no college degree, no connections inside the company, and no record of corporate success. Nobody there knew what she could do yet. Jenny's first job at Golden Phoenix had very little to do with the work she had spent 2 years studying. Most of her time went into supporting the account executives in the client growth department. She updated customer information, organized sales reports, prepared documents before meetings, and handled whatever small tasks the senior employees did not want to spend time on. If someone needed copies before a presentation, Jenny made them. If a report had missing information, it landed on her desk. More than once, someone asked her to bring coffee into a meeting she had helped prepare for but was not invited to attend. Jenny did the work without complaining. Getting into Golden Phoenix had taken too long for her to risk the opportunity over a task she thought was beneath her, but she paid attention to everything around her. The department managed accounts for small and regional businesses that paid Golden Phoenix to help them attract customers and increase sales. Every week, Jenny handled reports showing how many leads had come in, how many became paying customers, and how much revenue each account generated. Most people only needed her to put the numbers in the right place. Jenny wanted to know what the numbers meant. She began noticing that some of the highest spending clients were not getting the best results. A few accounts generated hundreds of leads, but converted very few of them into actual customers. Other accounts brought in fewer leads, but made more money. Jenny started asking questions when she had the chance. Some account executives answered her. Others told her not to worry about things outside her role. One afternoon, an executive dropped a stack of documents on Jenny's desk less than an hour before a client meeting. Several pages were missing updated figures, and the numbers in the summary did not match the latest report. Jenny corrected what she could and brought the finished documents to the conference room. As she placed them on the table, she heard the team discussing the client. The company had spent more money that quarter and received more leads, but sales had barely moved. One of the executives blamed the quality of the leads. Jenny had seen the account several times while preparing reports. The leads were not the only problem. She stopped for a moment. The response time went up too. The room became quiet. David, the director of the department, looked at her. "What?" Jenny pointed to the report. "They used to contact most new leads within an hour. Now it's taking them almost a day." One of the account executives looked annoyed. "We're in the middle of a meeting." Jenny nodded and left the room. She did not know whether anyone looked at the number after she was gone. The next morning, the same executive dropped another report on her desk. This time, he asked her to pull 6 months of response time data. The client had increased its advertising budget by nearly 20%, but the additional leads were not producing additional sales. Golden Phoenix had spent weeks discussing new ads, different offers, and whether the target audience was wrong. Jenny's report showed something much simpler. 6 months earlier, the client sales team had contacted most new leads within 60 minutes. As the business grew, that response time had stretched to more than 14 hours. By then, many potential customers had already contacted another company. David asked Jenny to sit in on the next internal review. She was there to explain the report, nothing more. The account executive still led the meeting. Jenny showed the numbers and answered the questions she was asked. The team recommended a new follow-up process for the client. New leads would be assigned immediately instead of sitting in a shared inbox, and unanswered inquiries would be flagged before the end of each hour. Jenny returned to her regular work. For the next several weeks, she continued updating reports, preparing documents, and handling support tasks. Then the client's numbers came back. The advertising budget had barely changed. The number of leads had barely changed. But the percentage of leads becoming paying customers had risen from just under 7% to more than 11%. The account executive presented the result at the weekly department meeting. David asked who had first found the response time problem. The executive hesitated before looking toward Jenny's desk. She did. Several people turned around. Jenny had been at Golden Phoenix for less than a year. Until then, many of them knew her mainly as the employee who fixed reports and handled work they did not have time to do. David called her into his office later that afternoon. He asked how she had found the problem. Jenny told him she had been comparing accounts with similar lead volume but different sales results. Why? Because more leads didn't seem to explain why some clients were making more money. David looked at the report again. He gave Jenny access to several additional accounts and told her to flag anything unusual before the next review. Her title did not change, neither did her salary. But for the first time, people at Golden Phoenix began bringing Jenny problems instead of only bringing her errands. The first result gave Jenny access to work she had not been trusted with before. She still handled many of her old responsibilities, but David began inviting her into internal reviews when a client had a problem nobody could explain. Jenny did not solve every one of them. Sometimes the answer was exactly what the account executive had already said, but often, she noticed things others had skipped because they were looking at one number at a time. One client kept demanding more leads, even though nearly a third of its existing customers had stopped buying within the previous year. Another was spending heavily to attract new customers while doing almost nothing with the people who had already purchased more than once. Jenny began building her recommendations around what each business was actually losing, not simply what it wanted to buy from Golden Phoenix. Her results made her harder to ignore. They also changed the way some people treated her. Coworkers who once handed her unfinished reports began asking for help with difficult accounts. Others questioned why someone in a support role was being invited into meetings above her position. One morning, Jenny found a report she had prepared returned to her desk. Several recommendations had been removed before the client presentation. The account executive responsible for the account told her the client was paying for lead generation, not advice about how to run its business. Jenny did not argue. 3 weeks later, the client complained that sales had not improved. David reviewed the earlier work and found the missing recommendations in Jenny's original file. After that, he made a decision. Jenny would no longer work only in support. She was assigned a small group of accounts of her own. They were not the department's biggest clients, and none of the senior account executives had fought to keep them. For Jenny, it was the first time Golden Phoenix would measure her by results that belonged directly to her. Jenny's first accounts were not the ones people at Golden Phoenix wanted. Most belonged to small businesses with limited budgets. One had already reduced its spending twice. Another had gone through 3 account executives in less than 2 years. The largest account in Jenny's group had been asking for more leads for months, even though its sales had barely changed. Jenny started with the same reports she had been reviewing for other people. This time, every decision was hers. She called the clients herself, asked how their sales teams handled new inquiries, and compared what they told her with what the numbers showed. The problems were different, but Jenny kept finding the same gap. Golden Phoenix was measuring how many leads it delivered. The clients were measuring how much money they made. Too often, nobody was paying enough attention to what happened between those 2 points. One of Jenny's clients, a small home service company, was receiving enough inquiries to grow, but converting less than 8% of them into paying customers. The owner wanted to increase the advertising budget. Jenny asked him to wait. She reviewed 3 months of inquiries and found that nearly 40% of the people who did not buy had never received a second call. The company was paying to find potential customers, contacting them once, and then paying to find new ones when they did not answer. Jenny recommended changing the follow-up process before spending another $1 on advertising. The owner was not convinced. More advertising felt like growth. Calling the same people again did not. Jenny showed him how much he had already spent to bring those inquiries in. He agreed to test the change for 1 month. The number of leads stayed almost the same. The advertising budget stayed the same, but the conversion rate rose from under 8% to more than 12%. For a small business, the difference was enough to make that month its best in more than a year. The owner increased his contract with Golden Phoenix. A second account followed, then a third. Within a year, the group of accounts nobody had wanted was producing some of the strongest growth rates in the department. David moved Jenny into a full account executive position. For the first time since joining Golden Phoenix, her title reflected at least part of the work she was already doing. Over the next several years, Jenny took on larger accounts. The work became more difficult as the businesses grew. A change that helped a company with 10 employees could fail completely at one with 200. Some clients wanted immediate results. Others ignored recommendations until a problem became expensive. Jenny learned which numbers mattered, which ones only looked impressive in a presentation, and when a client was asking Golden Phoenix to solve the wrong problem. Her performance became easy to measure. The accounts under her management renewed at a higher rate than the department average, and several clients increased their contracts after seeing results. One regional business credited her strategy with helping increase sales by more than 20% in a year without increasing its customer acquisition budget at the same rate. David promoted her again. By the time Jenny became a senior member of the client growth department, new employees were being told to study some of the account systems she had built. But the higher she moved, the more often her work became part of someone else's result. When one of Golden Phoenix's largest clients began losing money, Jenny spent 2 weeks helping rebuild the strategy. At the next leadership meeting, a senior executive presented the recovery plan to Tom. Jenny watched from the back of the room as her recommendations appeared on the screen. Her name was never mentioned. After the meeting, the executive stopped beside her. "Good work." Then he walked away. Jenny returned to her desk. Golden Phoenix was still the place where she had built nearly all of her professional experience, and Derek still depended on the stability she had spent years creating. Leaving meant walking away from 10 years of work without knowing how much of it another company would ever recognize. So Jenny stayed and kept producing results that became harder to ignore. By Jenny's 7th year at Golden Phoenix, she was managing some of the department's most valuable accounts. Her clients did not stay because she promised them more leads than everyone else. They stayed because she could show them where they were losing money and what needed to change. That year, Jenny finished with the highest sales performance in the department. The company named her its top seller. The following year, she did it again. By then, some coworkers had stopped treating her success as temporary. Others had simply found new reasons to resent it. If Jenny won a large account, someone said David had given her the best opportunity. If one of her clients expanded, someone said she had been lucky to get the account before it grew. Jenny heard most of it. She answered none of it. In her 9th year at Golden Phoenix, the department set a higher revenue target after losing 2 large clients early in the year. Several senior employees finished below their goals. Jenny ended the year above hers and brought in more revenue than anyone else in the department for the 3rd year in a row. At the annual company meeting, her name appeared on the screen again. 3 consecutive years as Golden Phoenix's top seller. This time, the applause was louder. The same people who once handed her coffee orders now stopped by her desk to congratulate her. Some told her that nobody in the department understood clients the way she did. Others said the company would be foolish not to give her more responsibility. Jenny had spent nearly 10 years at Golden Phoenix. She had started by correcting other people's reports and carrying documents into meetings she was not allowed to attend. Now the department's largest clients knew her name. New employees studied systems she had helped build, and the numbers placed her above everyone else in the room. Then David announced that Golden Phoenix would soon choose a new head for the client growth department. For the first time, Jenny was not the only person who believed she had earned the position. The announcement changed the atmosphere inside the client growth department almost immediately. David had led the department for years, but Golden Phoenix was expanding his responsibilities. He would move into a broader executive role, leaving his current position open. The company would spend the next several months evaluating candidates before choosing a new head of the department. Jenny did not need anyone to explain what the position would mean. For years, she had already been doing parts of the job without the title. She helped younger employees with difficult accounts. David asked for her opinion before major client reviews. When a strategy failed, Jenny was often one of the people called in to find out why. Now there was finally a position where that responsibility would be official. David called her into his office several days after the announcement. He told her the company wanted someone who could do more than manage personal accounts. The next department head would need to improve the performance of the entire team, retain major clients, and find new ways for Golden Phoenix to grow. Jenny understood. She had spent years proving what she could do with her own accounts. Now she would have to prove she could produce results beyond them. Over the following months, the company began watching the department more closely. Performance reports were reviewed in greater detail. Senior employees were given additional responsibilities. Jenny was asked to lead several internal account reviews and help restructure a group of underperforming clients. She did not treat the work as a temporary competition. She changed the way the team tracked follow-up problems, identified accounts at risk of leaving, and compared client revenue against the cost of bringing in new customers. Within 6 months, the group she had been asked to help had improved its client retention rate and recovered 2 accounts that had been close to leaving Golden Phoenix. Jenny's own sales numbers remained the highest in the department. Around the office, people began speaking about the promotion as if the decision were already obvious. Some congratulated her before the company had announced anything. One coworker told her to remember them when she moved into David's office. Jenny laughed and told them there was nothing to remember yet. But after 10 years at Golden Phoenix, this was the first time the next step seemed to depend on more than simply working harder and waiting. 3 months before the final decision, Tom introduced someone new to the department, his son, Adam. Adam had worked elsewhere after finishing college and had recently returned to Golden Phoenix. Tom said he wanted Adam to understand the company from inside one of its most important divisions. Officially, Adam was there to learn. He had no history with the department, no major accounts, and no results inside Golden Phoenix. But he did not arrive like a new employee. Within his first week, he was invited into meetings that junior staff normally waited years to attend. Reports Jenny had once needed permission to access were sent directly to him. Senior managers made time for his questions, even when the same questions from other employees would have been passed down to someone else. Jenny noticed the difference. So did everyone around her. At first, nobody said Adam had anything to do with the open position. He was Tom's son, and most people assumed the company was simply preparing him for a future role somewhere in the business. Then David asked Jenny to include Adam in one of her account reviews. Adam listened while she explained why a client with rising lead volume was still losing revenue. When Jenny finished, he asked why Golden Phoenix did not simply increase the client's advertising budget and replace the lost customers with new ones. Jenny explained that the cost of acquiring each new customer had already risen by nearly 30%. Spending more would increase revenue on paper, but the client's profit would continue shrinking unless they fixed the customers they were losing. Adam looked at the report again. If they want growth, they need more customers. They need to stop losing the ones they've already paid to get. The meeting moved on. A few days later, Jenny heard Adam present a different proposal for the same account. His plan focused on expanding the advertising campaign. The client liked the idea. It sounded faster, bigger, and easier to understand. Jenny said nothing. Adam was allowed to test it. 2 months later, lead volume had increased, but the cost of acquiring each customer had risen again, and the client's profit had barely moved. The result did not damage Adam's position. Instead, he was given another major account to work on. That was when the conversations inside the department began to change. People who had spent months telling Jenny the promotion was hers started watching Adam more carefully. Nobody said it directly yet. They did not need to. Golden Phoenix eventually announced the final stage of the selection process. The leading candidates would receive the same business growth project based on real client data. Each would have the same amount of time to analyze the problem, build a strategy, and present the expected financial impact to senior leadership. The project involved a group of regional businesses whose customer acquisition costs had been rising while revenue growth slowed. Golden Phoenix wanted a way to improve results without forcing clients to keep increasing their advertising budgets. Jenny began with the data. She compared where new customers came from, how much each one cost to acquire, how often they returned, and how much revenue they produced over time. One number stood out. The businesses were spending almost all of their growth budgets finding new customers, yet fewer than 1 in 5 customers returned for a second purchase. The customers who did return were worth more than 3 times as much over the following year. Jenny built her proposal around that gap. Instead of asking clients to spend more money finding more people, Golden Phoenix would help them increase the value of the customers they already had. Adam approached the project differently. His proposal focused on entering new markets, increasing lead volume, and expanding Golden Phoenix's existing sales model. His plan promised faster growth, but it also required much more spending. In the weeks before the presentations, Jenny continued managing her accounts while finishing the project at night. Adam spent more time with senior leadership. Coworkers noticed. Some still told Jenny not to worry. Her numbers were better, and her plan was built on years of client experience. Jenny did not join those conversations. She finished the final projections, checked the numbers again, and prepared to present her case. Jenny presented first. Tom, David, and several senior executives sat across the conference table while she walked them through the problem. Customer acquisition costs across the selected businesses had risen by nearly 30% in 2 years. More advertising was still producing more leads, but each new customer was becoming more expensive. At the same time, fewer than 20% of first-time customers were returning. Jenny showed what would happen if the businesses improved that number by only a few percentage points. Because returning customers cost far less to bring back and spent more over time, the additional revenue could exceed what another large increase in advertising was projected to produce. She did not promise immediate growth. The first months would be spent building follow-up systems, identifying the customers most likely to return, and measuring results the businesses had never tracked properly before. But by the end of the first year, Jenny projected that the strategy could increase customer value by more than 20% while reducing the pressure to keep raising acquisition budgets. The executives questioned her assumptions. Jenny had expected that. She showed them where each projection came from and how the plan could be tested with a smaller group of clients before Golden Phoenix expanded it. When she finished, Tom asked one final question. "And if the clients want faster growth? Then we can still help them find new customers," Jenny said. "But we should stop asking them to pay for the same growth twice." Tom looked at the numbers again. Jenny returned to her seat. Adam presented later that afternoon. His proposal was larger and easier to sell. He wanted Golden Phoenix to help clients enter new markets, increase advertising, and build larger sales pipelines. His projections showed more revenue in the first year than Jenny's, but the plan also required substantially more spending, and several executives questioned what would happen if acquisition costs continued rising. Adam argued that scale would give Golden Phoenix more data, more market share, and more opportunities to improve efficiency later. Both candidates were asked to revise parts of their proposals. The company then tested the strongest elements of each plan on a limited group of accounts. Over the following weeks, the results began to separate. Adam's accounts generated more leads, but the cost of producing each sale continued to rise. The accounts using Jenny's approach grew more slowly at first. Then repeat purchases began increasing. By the end of the test, her group had produced the stronger improvement in profit without requiring another major increase in advertising spend. David reviewed the results with Jenny. "You did everything they asked." Jenny looked at him. "Is that your way of saying I got the job?" David gave a small smile. "It's my way of saying nobody can question your results." Jenny wanted to believe that was enough. The company scheduled the announcement for the following week. By then, Jenny had every reason to believe she had done enough. She had finished with the strongest test results, remained Golden Phoenix's top seller for the third consecutive year, and spent months proving she could improve the performance of more than her own accounts. Around the department, people had already started treating the promotion as hers. Coworkers asked whether she was ready to move into David's office. One suggested a restaurant for the celebration. Jenny kept giving them the same answer. Nothing had been announced yet. But this time, even she had allowed herself to think about what the position would mean. After 10 years at Golden Phoenix, she would finally have the authority to make the decisions she had spent years helping other people make. On the day of the announcement, employees gathered in the department's main conference area. Jenny stood toward the back while Tom thanked the team for its work and spoke about the company's next stage of growth. Then David stepped forward to announce the new head of client growth. Jenny looked toward him. "Adam," the applause began. The next morning, Jenny woke up at the same time she always did. She got dressed, took the same route to Golden Phoenix, and arrived before most of the department. Nothing about the office had changed. Her desk was still where she had left it. The reports waiting in her inbox were still hers to finish. The only difference was the name now attached to every major decision in the department: Adam. Jenny could have resigned that morning. For several hours the night before, she had thought about it. But anger did not pay rent, and 10 years at Golden Phoenix had taught her how difficult it was to build a career without the right degree or connections. Nearly all of her professional experience existed inside one company. Much of the work that had made her valuable had been done behind other people's titles. Walking away without another job meant giving up the stability she had spent years building for herself and Derek. So Jenny returned to work. Adam held his first department meeting that week. He thanked everyone for their support and said Golden Phoenix had become too cautious. He wanted the department to think bigger, bring in more clients, and stop limiting growth by focusing on small improvements. Several employees nodded. Jenny listened. Adam announced higher sales targets and a new priority: larger contracts, more aggressive acquisition campaigns, and faster expansion into new markets. Jenny asked how the department would handle clients whose acquisition costs were already rising. Adam said each account would be reviewed individually, but the overall direction was clear. Golden Phoenix needed growth. After the meeting, one of Jenny's coworkers stopped beside her desk. Only a week earlier, the same woman had told Jenny she deserved the promotion more than anyone. "I think Adam might actually be good for the department." Jenny looked up from her screen. "Maybe. He has a different kind of vision." Jenny returned to the report in front of her. By the end of the week, most people had stopped mentioning the promotion. At first, Jenny tried to treat Adam the same way she had treated every manager before him. She gave him the information he asked for, explained problems when they appeared, and focused on her accounts. But Adam had not forgotten that Jenny had been the other leading candidate for his position. Reports she had submitted for years without issue were returned with questions. Recommendations she once discussed directly with clients now needed his approval. Before major meetings, Adam asked to review her presentations. Jenny followed the process. She had worked too long to give him a reason to call her difficult. The real problems began when his decisions reached her accounts. One of Jenny's largest clients had spent the previous year improving repeat purchases and reducing its dependence on paid advertising. Revenue was growing, but Adam wanted the company to increase its advertising budget by 25% and expand faster. Jenny showed him that the cost of acquiring each new customer had already risen by 18%. More spending could increase sales, but the client's profit margin would continue shrinking. Adam approved the campaign anyway. 3 months later, the client had more leads and more sales, but each new customer was costing more. Adam said the campaign needed more time to scale. Jenny was asked to prepare another set of projections and help correct the problems that followed. Similar decisions began appearing across the department. Adam preferred strategies that produced large numbers quickly. More leads, more spending, larger markets. Jenny kept fixing the problems because the clients were still hers. But the more often she did, the easier it became for Adam to keep making the same kind of decisions. Months passed. Jenny's name remained near the top of the department's sales reports, but the work felt different. For years, clients had trusted her because she could look beyond the number they wanted and show them the problem they actually had. Under Adam, she had less room to do that. One major client asked Jenny to review a new expansion plan before committing another large amount of money. She found that the company was already losing nearly 1 in 4 customers within 6 months of the first purchase. Expanding the campaign would bring in more people, but the same problem would continue underneath it. Jenny recommended fixing the retention problem first. Adam disagreed. The expansion contract was worth far more to Golden Phoenix than the smaller retention project Jenny had proposed. He told her to present both options but make the growth plan the primary recommendation. The client approved the larger contract. At the next executive review, Adam presented the deal as one of the department's biggest wins of the quarter. 3 months later, the client's customer losses had grown worse. The owner called Jenny directly. He wanted to know why nobody had warned him. Jenny had. She opened the original report on her computer and looked at the recommendation she had submitted before the contract was signed. The warning was still there. It had simply never reached the client in the form she had written it. Jenny spent the next several weeks helping the account recover. Golden Phoenix reduced part of its fee to keep the client from leaving. The company lost money on the correction. Adam called it an execution problem. Jenny said nothing in the meeting. Afterward, he asked her to stay behind. He told her that senior employees needed to support the direction of the department, even when they would have made a different decision. Jenny asked whether he believed she had failed to support it. Adam said he was only reminding her that every department needed one leader. Jenny left the room and returned to her desk. She had stayed because leaving without a plan felt reckless. But for the first time in 10 years, staying was beginning to cost her more than the promotion she had lost. Jenny did not leave. Not yet. She updated her resume, looked at job postings after work, and saved more money than usual. But every application reminded her of the same problem. On paper, she had spent 10 years at Golden Phoenix and become the company's top seller 3 years in a row. What the resume did not show was how many strategies she had built behind someone else's title, how many failing accounts she had helped recover without receiving formal credit, or how often her work had appeared in presentations delivered by senior employees. The positions that matched her current salary often required a college degree or leadership experience she had never officially been given. The positions willing to overlook those things offered less than she could afford to lose. Jenny kept working while she searched. Several weeks later, she stayed late to finish a client report before the next morning. Most of the department had already left. As she walked toward the printer, she heard voices from a conference room near Adam's office. The door was not fully closed. David was inside with Adam. Jenny would have kept walking if she had not heard her own name. Adam said the department could not continue with someone who questioned his decisions every time a strategy changed. David replied that Jenny still produced more revenue than anyone else on the team. Adam said that was part of the problem. As long as she remained, employees compared every decision he made with what Jenny would have done. David told him removing the department's top performer would be difficult to explain. Adam said he was not planning to do it immediately. He wanted her accounts reassigned gradually. Once her numbers dropped and her role became less important, the decision would be easier. Jenny stood still in the hallway. David did not agree with him. He also did not refuse. He asked Adam whether Tom knew. Adam said his father had given him responsibility for the department and expected him to make his own decisions. Jenny walked back to her desk before either man left the room. She sat down and looked at the report she had stayed late to finish. 10 years earlier, Golden Phoenix had given her the first opportunity nobody else would. For a long time, that had been enough to make her stay through every insult, every missing credit, and every decision she believed was unfair. Now Adam was preparing to take away the one thing she had always been able to protect, her results. Jenny finished the report before she went home. The next morning, she arrived early. She opened a blank document and wrote her resignation letter. It was short. She did not list the promotion, the accounts, or the conversation she had heard. She gave notice and thanked Golden Phoenix for the opportunity it had given her. Before sending it, Jenny looked around the department. She had spent almost her entire adult life there. She knew which clients would call before 9 in the morning, which reports David would ask for at the end of each month, and which accounts would become problems before the numbers made it obvious. For years, leaving had seemed more frightening than anything the company could do to her. Jenny sent the letter. David called her into his office less than 10 minutes later. Adam was already there. David asked whether something had happened. Jenny told him she was resigning. Adam leaned back in his chair. "You're making a big decision because you're unhappy with a few changes." Jenny looked at him. "No, I'm making it because I know what happens if I stay." Adam's expression changed slightly. David asked if another company had made her an offer. No, that answer surprised both of them. David reminded her how difficult it could be to leave after 10 years in one company without another position waiting. Jenny already knew. Adam said she should take a few days before doing something she might regret. Jenny shook her head. "I've already spent enough time waiting for things to change." She completed her notice period, transferred her accounts, and answered every question the employees replacing her asked. On her final day, Jenny cleared the desk she had used for years. There was less to pack than she expected. Derek was waiting when she came home. He looked at the box in her hands and understood before she said anything. "You quit?" Jenny put the box down. "Yeah. You got another job?" "No." Derek was quiet for a moment. "Good." Jenny looked at him. "That's all you're going to say? I've been waiting 10 years for you to stop working for people who think they're doing you a favor." Jenny laughed once and sat down beside him. For the first time since she was 18, she had no job to wake up for the next morning. For the first few days after leaving Golden Phoenix, Jenny believed the hardest part was over. She had 10 years of experience, 3 consecutive years as the company's top seller, and a record of managing some of its largest accounts. She expected finding another job to take time. She did not expect to discover how different her career looked to people who had never worked with her. Jenny updated her resume and began applying for senior sales and client growth positions across Columbus. Some companies rejected her because she did not have a bachelor's degree. Others were interested in her sales numbers but asked about formal management experience. Jenny had trained employees, led account reviews, rebuilt strategies, and helped shape decisions across the department. But when one hiring manager asked how many employees had officially reported directly to her, the answer was none. The title that would have proved otherwise had gone to Adam. Another company asked about the 20% sales increase Jenny had helped one regional client achieve. The interviewer wanted to know whether she had designed the strategy herself or worked as part of a larger team. Jenny explained what she had done. But the final plan had been presented under a senior executive's name, and there was no simple document she could show that captured 10 years of being the person called when other people's accounts stopped working. Weeks passed. Jenny received offers, but most came from companies that wanted her to return to work she had already outgrown for less money than she had been earning. For the first time, Jenny understood how much of her value had existed inside Golden Phoenix without ever becoming part of the career she could carry out of it. Jenny had always been careful with money. After years of supporting Derek, she knew how long her savings could cover rent and basic expenses. She also knew the number was getting smaller every month. Derek had been working from home for several years by then, taking small remote jobs that fit around his disability. He had saved more than Jenny realized. One morning, she found an envelope on the kitchen table. "What's this?" "My part of the rent." Jenny pushed it back toward him. Derek pushed it toward her again. "I'm 25. "I know how old you are." "Then stop acting like I'm 13. Jenny looked at the envelope. "Keep it." "Jenny, for your future." Derek did not move his hand. "You are my future too." Jenny looked at him for a moment. Then she took only enough to cover part of the month's utilities and pushed the rest back. Neither of them argued after that. Jenny continued applying. She became less interested in titles and more interested in what the companies were actually building. Most of the job descriptions sounded familiar. Sell more, bring in more accounts, increase lead volume, hit larger targets. The same language Golden Phoenix had used for years. One company offered her a strong salary to manage a sales team. During the final interview, Jenny asked how they measured whether their clients were actually making more money. The executive spent several minutes explaining how many leads they generated. Jenny asked again. He did not have a different answer. She declined the offer. Derek thought she was crazy. "You need a job." "I know. That was a job. I also know that." "Then what are you looking for?" Jenny did not answer immediately. She had spent 10 years helping businesses fix problems after someone else had already decided what service to sell them. She did not want another company that only needed her to hit a number. "Something worth building," she said. Jenny found the New Line posting late one night. It had been online for more than a week and appeared to have attracted little attention. The title was vague. The salary was lower than positions Jenny had already rejected. The list of responsibilities was long enough to sound like several jobs combined into one. New client outreach, sales, account management, customer research, building internal processes, helping shape the company's market strategy. Jenny almost closed the page. Then she read the description again. New Line was not promising to generate more leads for businesses. It was trying to build a system that connected the entire customer process. How a business found a potential customer, how quickly it responded, what happened after the first sale, and whether that customer ever came back. The company wanted to help small businesses understand where they were losing people instead of simply paying more to replace them. Jenny sat up. She read the posting from the beginning. The wording was rough. The company website had very little on it. There were no case studies, no large clients, and no team page filled with executives. Jenny searched for more information and found almost nothing. New Line had been created only months earlier. The founder was Miles. As far as Jenny could tell, he was also the only employee. She looked at the salary again. It was low enough to explain why the posting was still there. Anyone qualified to handle everything Miles wanted could probably earn much more somewhere else. Anyone willing to accept the salary probably could not do everything he needed. Jenny should have closed the page. Instead, she kept reading the same section about customer retention and long-term value. For years, she had watched businesses spend more money finding new customers while ignoring the ones disappearing after the first sale. At Golden Phoenix, that idea had been one strategy among many. New Line appeared to be building the entire company around it. Jenny submitted her application before she could talk herself out of it. Miles replied 2 days later and invited Jenny to an interview. The address led her to a small office on the second floor of an older commercial building. There was no receptionist, no company logo behind a front desk, no row of employees working at computers. When Jenny walked in, Miles was moving a box of printer paper off the only empty chair. "Sorry, I wasn't expecting anyone this early. I'm 5 minutes early." Miles checked the time. "Then I should have been ready 10 minutes ago." Jenny sat down. From where she was, she could see almost the entire company. 2 desks, a whiteboard covered with notes, several boxes of documents, one small meeting table. Only one computer was turned on. Miles noticed where she was looking. "The team page on the website is accurate." Jenny looked at him. "There isn't a team page." Exactly. It was the first time she had laughed during a job interview in months. Miles did not spend long asking about her certifications or why she had never gone to college. He wanted to know what she had actually done at Golden Phoenix. Jenny explained the accounts she had managed and the problems she had learned to look for. When she mentioned the businesses that kept increasing their advertising budgets while losing customers after the first purchase, Miles stood and went to the whiteboard. He had drawn a simple customer journey across it. A lead came in. The business responded. A sale happened. After that, the line broke into several question marks. "This is where most small businesses stop seeing anything," Miles said. "They know someone bought. They don't know why that person came back, why they didn't come back, or when they disappeared." He showed Jenny the system he had been trying to build. New Line would bring information from different parts of a small business into one place. It would show how quickly leads were contacted, which ones became customers, how often those customers returned, and where the business was losing revenue. Jenny asked how many companies were using it. Miles hesitated. 2. Paying? 1. The second was testing it for free. Jenny asked how many people Miles had spoken to before building the system. He showed her a list. There were dozens of businesses. Most had liked the idea. Very few had agreed to pay for it. "What do they say no to?" Jenny asked. "They say they already have customer data." "That's not what I asked." Miles looked at her. Jenny pointed to the whiteboard. "What do they think you're selling them?" Miles began explaining the platform again. Jenny stopped him. "That's probably the problem." She had understood his idea because she had spent 10 years looking at the same gap from the other side. Most business owners would not. They did not wake up wanting better customer data. They wanted more sales, lower costs, and fewer customers disappearing. Miles had built the system around a real problem. He was still selling the system instead of the problem it solved. The interview had lasted nearly 2 hours when Jenny finally asked about the job posting. "You want one person to do sales, manage clients, research the market, and help you build the company." "Yes, for that salary." Miles nodded. "That's why nobody wants the job. A few people wanted it. Were they qualified?" Miles did not answer. Jenny already knew. Miles told Jenny the truth about New Line. The company had enough money to keep operating for several more months if he remained careful. He had used most of his own savings to build the first version of the system. He could not afford an experienced sales team, a customer success department, or the kind of salary someone with Jenny's record could earn elsewhere. What he needed was one person who could do several jobs until the company grew. That was exactly what had made everyone else walk away. Jenny asked where he expected New Line to be in 5 years. Miles did not answer with a revenue target. He wanted a small business with 15 employees to understand its customers as clearly as a corporation with 15,000. Large companies could afford teams to track customer behavior, sales performance, and retention. Small businesses had information scattered across inboxes, spreadsheets, advertising platforms, and the memories of employees. By the time they realized customers were disappearing, the money was already gone. Miles wanted New Line to show them the problem while they could still fix it. Jenny looked at the whiteboard again. For 10 years, she had worked inside a company that made money by helping businesses find more customers. She had watched clients celebrate rising lead numbers while their costs climbed and old customers disappeared. She had tried to solve those problems one account at a time. Miles was trying to build a company around solving them from the beginning. The salary was still too low. The company could still fail. Jenny had already spent months watching her savings shrink. Taking the job would not be the safe choice, but every safe job she had interviewed for wanted her to return to a version of the work she had already left. Jenny asked Miles how long he would need to know whether she was actually useful to the company. A few months? 3? Probably, Jenny nodded. I'll take the salary you're offering. Miles looked surprised. Jenny continued before he could respond. For 3 months, his expression changed. And after that? If I haven't made a difference, you can replace me. I can't afford to replace you. Then I guess I'd better make a difference. Miles waited. He knew there was more. Jenny looked around the small office. There was almost nothing there yet. No team, no major clients, no reputation worth protecting. That was also why the opportunity existed. If this works, she said, I don't want a raise. What do you want? Half. Miles stared at her. Half of what? The company? For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Miles had spent months trying to find someone who could help him build New Line. Jenny had spent 10 years helping build value inside a company she would never own. Neither of them had enough reason to trust the other yet. Jenny stood. 3 months. You decide whether I'm worth it. Miles looked at the whiteboard, then back at her. And if I say no after 3 months, then I leave. Jenny held out her hand. Miles did not take it immediately. 50% is a lot. So is what you're asking one person to do. Miles looked at her hand again. Then he shook it. 3 months, Jenny nodded. For the first time in her career, she had accepted a job without caring what title would be written beside her name. Jenny's first day at New Line looked nothing like her first day at Golden Phoenix. There was no training schedule, no employee handbook waiting on her desk, and no department to explain how things were done. Miles gave her access to everything. The one paying client, the business testing the system for free, the list of businesses that had rejected him, the product he had spent months building, and the bank account that showed exactly how little time the company had left. Jenny started with the businesses Miles had already contacted. She called several of them herself. Most remembered New Line. Almost none remembered what it did. One owner thought Miles was selling customer management software. Another believed the company was a marketing agency. A third said he already had enough reports and did not need another dashboard. Jenny asked each of them the same question. What problem had they expected New Line to solve? The answers were different, but none matched what Miles had built. By the end of the week, Jenny had listened to more rejections than sales conversations. She brought her notes to Miles. You don't have a product problem. That's good. You have a selling problem. Miles looked less pleased. Jenny explained what she had heard. He was showing business owners how much information the system could collect. They did not care. They wanted to know why sales were slowing, why advertising cost more than it used to, and why customers who bought once never came back. Miles had spent months explaining how New Line worked before proving why anyone needed it. Jenny changed the first conversation. She stopped offering demonstrations. Instead, she asked business owners for a few basic numbers: how much they spent finding new customers, how many people bought a second time, and how long it took their teams to respond to a new inquiry. Many did not know. That became the opening. Jenny offered a short review of their existing customer process before asking them to buy anything. Miles thought they were giving away too much work. Jenny told him they were buying something they needed more. What? A reason for them to listen. The first several reviews led nowhere. One business owner agreed that he had a problem and still refused to pay. Another used Jenny's recommendations without hiring New Line. A third stopped answering her calls. Weeks passed. New Line still had only one paying client. Miles continued improving the system. Jenny continued changing the way they sold it. Neither of them mentioned the 3-month deadline. They both knew exactly how much time was left. The first real opportunity came from a regional home services company with 3 locations. The business had increased its advertising budget by almost 30% in 1 year, yet revenue had grown by less than 10%. The owner believed the company needed more leads. Jenny asked to see what happened to the leads they already had. The records were scattered across several systems. Some inquiries were answered within minutes. Others waited until the next day. No one tracked how many potential customers were contacted more than once. After a service was completed, the company rarely followed up unless there was a complaint. Jenny spent 2 days organizing enough information to show the owner what was happening. The business was paying more to bring in new inquiries, but nearly 1/3 of them never received a second contact after the first attempt failed. Customers who had used the company before were also being treated almost the same as complete strangers. Every month, the business spent thousands of dollars finding new people while doing almost nothing with the people it had already paid to acquire. Jenny presented the problem in one page. No long demonstration, no explanation of every feature Miles had built. She showed the owner how much money was being spent, where customers were disappearing, and what new line would track differently. The owner looked at the numbers. How much more business can you guarantee? None, he looked up. Then what am I paying for? To stop guessing where you're losing the business you already have. The owner did not sign that day. Miles thought the opportunity was gone. 3 days later, he called back. He agreed to a 90-day test at one location. It was the largest contract New Line had signed. Jenny and Miles now had to prove that the problem they had identified could actually be fixed. Miles connected the company's existing customer information to New Line's system. Jenny worked with the staff to change what happened after each inquiry. New leads that had not received a response were flagged. Missed calls were followed up. Customers who had completed a service were separated from people who had never purchased. For the first month, the results barely moved. The owner called Jenny and asked whether they had wasted their money. She reviewed the data again. The new follow-up process was working, but employees were still ignoring many of the alerts because they arrived during the busiest hours of the day. Jenny changed the system with Miles. Instead of asking employees to watch another dashboard, the most urgent follow-ups were sent into the tools they were already using. The second month improved. By the end of the 90-day test, the location was converting more of its existing inquiries without increasing advertising spend. Repeat bookings had also started rising. The owner expanded New Line to all 3 locations. The home services account gave New Line something it had never had before, a result that could be shown to another business. Jenny stopped selling an idea. She could now show what had happened when one company stopped treating every missing sale as a reason to buy more advertising. The next clients came slowly, but they came faster than the first. Jenny focused on businesses with the same kind of problem. Enough customer activity to create valuable data, but not enough staff or systems to understand where money was being lost. She rejected businesses New Line was not ready to serve. When Miles wanted to accept a large client in an industry they did not understand, Jenny showed him how much time they would spend rebuilding the product for one contract. When Jenny promised a client a change Miles could not build quickly enough, he told her no. They argued more than once, but each disagreement forced them to make the company clearer. By the end of the 3rd month, New Line had several paying clients. Revenue was still small. The company was nowhere close to safe. But for the first time, the money coming in was enough to show that businesses would pay for what Miles had built if they understood the problem first. On the final evening of Jenny's 3-month trial, Miles placed a folder on her desk. Jenny opened it. Inside were the documents for a new ownership agreement. She read the first page, then looked at him. "You decided?" "I decided a while ago." "Then why wait 3 months?" "You said 3 months." Jenny continued reading. The agreement did not give her 50% immediately without conditions. The ownership would vest over time, protecting both of them if one walked away. Jenny read every page before looking up again. "Half? Half," she signed. Miles signed after her. There was no celebration. They still had bills due, clients to serve, and a company that could disappear if a few contracts were lost. But Jenny left the office that night owning part of the place where she worked for the first time in her life. Becoming a co-owner did not change Jenny's work the next morning. She still called potential clients, reviewed existing accounts, and handled problems that would eventually belong to several different departments if New Line survived long enough to have them. Miles continued improving the system and building features faster than the company could properly document them. For months, the two of them did almost everything themselves. When a new client signed, Jenny handled the onboarding. When the client wanted a change, Miles decided whether the system could support it. Every new contract brought in more money, but it also created more work for the same 2 people. Their first hire was not another salesperson. Jenny wanted someone who could help existing clients use the system properly. She had seen too many companies sell aggressively and then lose customers because nobody paid attention after the contract was signed. Their next hires helped with implementation, sales, and client research. Jenny and Miles also began deciding what kind of company they did not want New Line to become. Salespeople could not promise results the system could not support, and a large contract was not automatically a good contract. Jenny hired one early employee who had no experience in customer growth but had spent years managing operations for a small service business. He understood why leads were missed during busy hours and why employees ignored systems that created more work. Within months, he helped simplify the onboarding process for several clients. New lines still made mistakes. One early client left after the team spent months adapting the system to a business that had never been a good fit. After that, Jenny began reviewing not only how much revenue a client could bring in, but how much work it would take to produce that revenue. Little by little, New Line stopped operating like two people trying to keep a startup alive. It began operating like a company that knew what kind of business it wanted to become. Over the next 2 years, New Line continued to grow. The home services company that had tested the system at one location expanded it across the rest of its business. Other clients referred companies they knew. Jenny built a sales process around the problems New Line solved best, and Miles continued improving the system around what clients actually used instead of every feature they requested. Revenue more than doubled in the first full year after Jenny joined. The following year, it grew again. The company moved out of the small office where Jenny had first interviewed and into a larger space. The two desks became a team. The whiteboard filled with Miles's notes was replaced by meeting rooms, client dashboards, and employees responsible for work Jenny and Miles had once done themselves. For the first time, Jenny had people reporting directly to her. She trained them to look beyond the number a client complained about first. If a business asked for more leads, they checked what happened to the existing ones. If sales were rising but profit was falling, they looked at acquisition costs. If a client kept replacing lost customers with new ones, they measured how much that cycle was costing. The approach worked. But by the end of New Line's third year, the growth began to slow. The company was still adding clients. Revenue was still increasing. Nothing looked broken. That was what made the problem difficult to see. The sales team was working harder to sign each new account. Larger companies took longer to make decisions. Smaller businesses liked the idea but often believed New Line was something they could add later. Several competitors had also started using the language of customer retention and lifetime value in their own sales pitches. At the same time, Jenny noticed something else. The clients getting the strongest results from New Line were not always the ones spending the most money or using the most features. A smaller group was producing results far above the rest. Their customers returned more often. Their acquisition costs mattered less over time. Their revenue continued growing, even when they did not increase advertising at the same rate. Jenny began comparing those accounts. She separated them by industry, customer type, purchase frequency, and the way each business used New Line after the first sale. The more she looked, the less random the difference appeared. One evening, long after most of the team had gone home, Miles found Jenny still working through the account data. "Problem?" he asked. Jenny kept looking at the screen. "I don't know yet." Miles pulled a chair beside her. Jenny showed him the numbers. New Line had spent 3 years helping businesses find where customers were disappearing. But some clients were creating far more value from the same system than others. If Jenny could understand why, New Line might not need to keep growing one account at a time. For the first time since the company had found its market, Jenny was looking at a problem that could change what New Line became next. Miles had grown up in a family that had spent decades manufacturing office paper. The business began with his grandfather and later passed to his parents. By the time Miles was old enough to work, the company supplied copy paper and other office products to businesses across the region. His parents expected him to become the third generation to continue it. Miles worked there for several years. He learned how the business operated, but he never wanted to spend the rest of his life running it. The more time he spent around the company, the more interested he became in a different problem. His family understood production better than almost anyone he knew. They knew how much each order cost, which customers bought the most, and how to keep factories running efficiently. But when Miles asked why some business customers stayed for years while others disappeared after 2 orders, nobody had a clear answer. Sales records existed in one place. Customer complaints were stored somewhere else. Follow-up depended on individual employees remembering what had happened. Miles began building small systems to organize the information. His parents saw them as tools that might help the family business. Miles saw something larger. Thousands of smaller companies had the same problem and could not afford the teams or technology used by major corporations. He wanted to build something for them. For years, he tried to explain the idea to his parents. They did not think it was a business. His father told him the family already had a company that had survived for generations. If Miles wanted to build his own, he could do it without using the family's money. Miles had saved part of what he earned while working there. It was enough to leave, but not enough to make failure comfortable. He left anyway. He moved to Columbus and used most of his savings to build the first version of New Line. He spoke to business owners, changed the system, and kept trying to explain what he believed they needed. Most listened, few paid. By the time Jenny found his job posting, Miles had built something useful but had almost run out of time to turn it into a company. He had spent years wanting one person to see what he was trying to build. Jenny had seen it during a 2-hour interview. 3 years later, the company they had built together had reached a problem neither of them could solve by doing more of the same. Jenny spent the next several weeks comparing New Line's strongest accounts with the rest. At first, she expected the answer to be industry. It was not. Some home service companies performed extremely well while others showed average results. The same was true for clinics, local retailers, and other businesses using the system. Company size did not explain it either. Several smaller clients were producing more long-term value from each customer than businesses with much larger budgets. Jenny looked at how often customers bought, how quickly businesses followed up, and which parts of New Line they used most. A pattern began to appear. Most clients used New Line to find problems. They watched missed leads, response times, and customers who had stopped buying. The strongest clients did something different. They used the same information before the customer disappeared. One company contacted customers based on when they were most likely to need the service again. Another identified first-time buyers with a high chance of returning and changed its follow-up for that group. A third stopped sending the same offer to every customer and focused on what each group had already purchased. The results were far larger than Jenny expected. Across the strongest accounts, repeat customers were generating more than twice the value of one-time buyers. Those businesses were also spending far less of each additional dollar replacing customers they had already lost. Jenny pulled data from the previous 2 years. The cost of acquiring a new customer across many of New Line's clients had risen by more than 30%. Advertising had become more expensive. Competition had increased. Businesses were paying more for the same first sale. Yet most of them still spent the majority of their growth budgets trying to find more new people. Jenny showed the numbers to Miles. "We've been helping them see where they're losing customers. That's the company. That's half the company." Miles looked at her. Jenny opened the results from the strongest accounts. The best clients aren't waiting until someone disappears. They're using the data to know who should come back, when, and why. Miles went through the numbers. "We already give them that information. We give them the pieces. They figured out what to do with it." Jenny had seen the same mistake at Golden Phoenix. Businesses thought growth meant adding more people at the top. Golden Phoenix had made money feeding that belief. New Line had been built to show what happened after those customers arrived. But even New Line was still waiting for clients to decide how to use the information. Jenny believed that was the wall they had reached. Jenny asked the sales team to review why businesses had rejected New Line during the previous year. One answer appeared more than the others. Many understood the problem but did not believe it was urgent. They knew customers disappeared. They simply assumed finding new ones was easier than changing what happened after the sale. The data from New Line's strongest clients suggested a larger opportunity. Jenny wanted the company to stop selling itself only as a system that found where customers were being lost. She wanted New Line to help businesses build repeat revenue deliberately. Miles understood the opportunity. He also understood what it would cost. The product could track customer behavior, but it had not been built to guide clients toward the next action. New Line would need to change part of the system and narrow the market to industries where repeat purchases could create a measurable difference. That meant walking away from businesses they already knew how to sell to. Miles looked at the projections. "How many current prospects would we lose?" "Almost half. And you're calling this a growth plan?" "I'm calling it a plan to stop selling the same thing to everyone." New Line was already profitable. Jenny was asking them to change the sales process, part of the product, and the market they targeted based on a pattern that had not yet been tested at scale. If she was wrong, they could lose months while competitors continued signing clients. Jenny proposed a smaller test. They would select a group of existing clients in industries where customers had a natural reason to return, build a more active system around them, and measure whether it created enough additional revenue to justify changing the company. Miles looked at the numbers again. How long? 6 months. Miles nodded. Then we tested. Jenny chose the first group carefully. She did not select Newline's largest clients. She selected businesses with enough customer history to show whether the idea worked and enough repeat potential to produce a meaningful result. The team divided customers based on what they had purchased, how long it had been since the last purchase, and how often similar customers normally returned. Miles and the product team changed the system so businesses did not only see that a customer was becoming inactive, they could see which customers were most likely to return and when action had the highest chance of working. The first month produced almost nothing. Several clients continued using the system the old way. Employees ignored recommendations when business became busy. One company sent too many follow-ups too quickly and received complaints. Jenny stopped the campaign and changed the process. The second month was better, but not enough to justify rebuilding Newline around it. Miles did not pressure her. He did not need to. Jenny saw the same numbers he did. By the 4th month, one client began separating from the rest. It was not sending more messages or offering larger discounts. It had simply become more precise about which customers it contacted and when. Repeat purchases rose. Then another client showed the same pattern. By the end of the 6-month test, the strongest businesses in the group were generating significantly more revenue from existing customers without increasing their advertising budgets. One had increased repeat customer revenue by nearly 30%. Another had reduced the amount it spent replacing lost customers while total sales continued to grow. The result was not universal. Some businesses barely improved. Jenny studied those too. The companies that failed had treated the system like another marketing tool. The ones that succeeded had changed how they operated around the customer information. That difference gave Newline something more valuable than a successful test. It showed them exactly which businesses they should sell to and which ones they should refuse. Jenny and Miles made the decision. Newline would narrow its market, rebuild part of the product around repeat revenue, and change the way the company sold itself. They would stop promising to help every business understand its customers. They would focus on businesses where understanding the customer could be tied directly to money. It meant walking away from part of the market they had spent 3 years building. It also gave Newline a path no competitor was offering in the same way. Changing Newline's direction took longer than making the decision. Miles and the product team spent months rebuilding parts of the system around what they had learned from the test. Jenny changed the sales process again. Newline no longer started by asking businesses how many leads they wanted. The team looked first at how often customers should naturally return, how much a repeat customer was worth, and whether the business had enough control over its own customer experience to change the result. That eliminated many potential clients before a sales conversation even began. In the first months, the number of new contracts fell. Some employees questioned whether narrowing the market while growth was already slowing had been a mistake. Jenny kept watching the clients that had adopted the new system. Their results continued separating from the rest. One regional company increased repeat customer revenue by more than 30% in a year. The strongest result came from a client that had planned to increase its advertising budget by nearly $500,000. After using Newline to identify which customers were most likely to return and when, the company redirected part of that budget into its existing customer base. Total sales still increased, but the business spent far less than originally planned to produce that growth. That result changed the way potential clients listened. Newline was no longer asking them to buy another system and hope they used it correctly. Jenny could show exactly how much money similar businesses were spending to replace customers they might have kept. The sales cycle became shorter, contracts became larger. Existing clients expanded the system across more locations. By the end of the year, Newline's revenue had grown faster than in either of the previous 2 years. The following year, it accelerated again. The company hired carefully, but it was no longer small. Jenny built teams responsible for sales, client growth, and long-term accounts. Miles led the expansion of the product. Competitors began using similar language and adding retention features to their own services. Jenny did not try to compete with all of them. She kept Newline focused on the businesses where its results could be measured most clearly. 3 years after she had walked into Miles's office for the first time, Newline was no longer trying to prove that it could survive. It was deciding how large it wanted to become. Golden Phoenix did not collapse when Jenny left. For a while, nothing dramatic happened. The company still had experienced employees, long-term clients, and a name businesses in Columbus already knew. Adam redistributed Jenny's accounts among several members of the department. Some clients barely noticed. Others began receiving different recommendations from different people. When problems appeared, Adam hired employees with strong resumes and experience at larger companies. Several were good salespeople. None knew the history behind Jenny's old accounts, and Adam continued measuring success through the numbers he trusted most: new contracts, lead volume, and immediate revenue. For a time, those numbers kept the department looking healthy. Golden Phoenix signed new clients even as older ones began leaving more often. In the first full year after Jenny's departure, revenue fell only slightly. Adam told Tom the company was adjusting to a new growth strategy. Tom did not interfere. He wanted his son to prove he could lead the department on his own. The following year, 2 major clients ended their contracts within months of each other. Adam responded by raising sales targets and hiring more people. New contracts came in, but Golden Phoenix was spending more to win them and losing too many before they became long-term accounts. David warned Adam that the department was replacing experienced judgment with constant acquisition. Adam pointed to the new contracts in the pipeline. David pointed to the clients leaving through the other door. Neither changed the other's mind. By the 3rd year, the department's revenue was nearly 30% below where it had been when Jenny left. The problem was no longer one employee or one bad quarter. Golden Phoenix had built its growth around a model that was becoming more expensive, and Adam kept trying to solve it by pushing the same model harder. Jenny did not spend those years watching Golden Phoenix. For a long time, she knew very little about what was happening there. She was too busy building new line. She heard when one former client left. She saw a few old coworkers change jobs. None of it mattered enough to pull her attention away from the company in front of her. Then Newline began looking for a faster way to expand. Its strongest growth was coming from larger regional businesses, but entering each new market one client at a time was expensive. Jenny and Miles considered several options. They could open new offices, build larger sales teams, or acquire a smaller company that already had the client relationships Newline wanted. Their advisors brought them a list of possible targets. Golden Phoenix was on it. Jenny stared at the name longer than the others. Miles noticed. "We can remove it," Jenny shook her head. "Why?" "Because I know what they have." Golden Phoenix was weaker than it had been 3 years earlier, but it still had valuable client relationships, experienced employees, and a presence Newline would need years to build on its own. The problem was the business around those assets. Revenue had declined. Several large accounts had left. The client growth department was spending more to replace clients than it had in the past, and the company had failed to build a strong answer to the shift toward customer retention and long-term value. Newline had exactly that answer. Jenny asked for the full financial information before making any decision. She did not want Golden Phoenix because she had once worked there. If the numbers did not make sense, she would walk away. The deeper the team looked, the clearer the opportunity became. Golden Phoenix had customers Newline wanted. Newline had the system and strategy Golden Phoenix had failed to build. Combining them could give Newline years of market access without starting from zero. It would also give Golden Phoenix's remaining clients a reason to stay. Miles looked across the table at Jenny after the final review. "Still want me to remove it?" Jenny closed the report. No, Newline made an offer. 3 years after Jenny had left Golden Phoenix with no job waiting for her, she was preparing to return as one of the owners of the company buying it. Golden Phoenix did not accept Newline's first offer. Tom believed the company was worth more than the numbers suggested. Golden Phoenix still had long-term contracts, experienced employees, and a name that had taken years to build. He was not willing to sell it at a price based only on 3 difficult years. Jenny understood his position. She also knew Newline was not buying the company Golden Phoenix had been. It was buying the company that existed now. The negotiations continued for weeks. Newline reviewed contracts, client retention records, staffing costs, and the accounts most likely to leave if nothing changed. Jenny recognized some of the names immediately. Several had once been her clients. She did not let that change the numbers. When one account looked weaker than Miles expected, Jenny said so. When another still had more value than the financial reports showed, she explained why. Miles asked her once whether working on the deal felt strange. "Sometimes." "Want me to handle more of it?" "No." Jenny had spent too many years watching decisions get made in rooms she was not allowed to enter. She was not going to leave this one because the company on the other side happened to know her name. The final agreement was not a rescue. New Line would acquire a controlling interest in Golden Phoenix and integrate the parts of the business that still had value into its own growth strategy. Some services would remain. Others would be changed or removed. Golden Phoenix's clients would gain access to New Line's customer growth system, while New Line would gain the regional relationships and experienced teams it would otherwise need years to build. Tom would no longer control the company. For the first time since taking over the family business, he would have to answer to someone else. When the final terms were accepted, Jenny read the agreement twice before signing. Miles signed beside her. There was no celebration in the room. The difficult part had not been buying Golden Phoenix. It would be deciding what happened to it next. The announcement was made to Golden Phoenix employees on a Monday morning. Most had known the company was looking for outside investment. Few knew who the buyer was until that day. Adam stood near the front of the room with Tom and David while employees gathered around them. 3 years earlier, Adam had stood in almost the same place while the department applauded his promotion. This time, nobody knew what the announcement would mean for their jobs. Tom spoke first. He told them Golden Phoenix had reached an agreement with New Line. The two companies would begin operating under new ownership, and a team from New Line would arrive that morning to lead the transition. The name meant something to many people in the room. New Line had become one of the fastest-growing companies in the same market Golden Phoenix had once dominated. Some employees had lost clients to it. Others had studied its results while trying to understand why Golden Phoenix's own growth kept slowing. Adam knew more than most. He had spent the previous weeks reviewing the acquisition documents. He knew New Line had two principal owners. Miles was one. The other name had not appeared in the early internal discussions he had seen. The conference room doors opened. Miles entered first with several members of New Line's transition team. Jenny walked beside him. For a few seconds, nobody moved. David recognized her immediately. So did the employees who had worked in client growth 3 years earlier. Jenny saw some of the same faces that had surrounded Adam after his promotion. A few were older. Some had different titles. Others were gone. Adam looked from Jenny to Miles, then toward Tom. Jenny did not stop to watch anyone's reaction. She placed her documents on the conference table and took the seat reserved for New Line's leadership. Miles introduced the transition team. Then he introduced Jenny as New Line's co-owner and the executive who would oversee the integration of Golden Phoenix's client growth operations. The room remained quiet. 3 years earlier, Jenny had left the same company carrying a small box from her desk. Now every major decision about the department she had once been denied the chance to lead would come through her. The first transition meeting included Tom, Adam, David, and several senior leaders from both companies. Jenny had reviewed the numbers before she entered the room. She knew which accounts were profitable, which services were losing money, and which clients were most likely to leave within the next 6 months. There was no reason to spend the meeting discussing the past. Miles asked Jenny to begin with client growth. She opened the first report. Golden Phoenix was still bringing in new business. That had never been the only problem. The department was losing long-term accounts faster than it could replace them, and the cost of winning each new client had continued to rise. Jenny showed the difference between the company's new contract numbers and the revenue those contracts produced after 1 year. The gap had widened every year since she left. Adam said the market had changed. Jenny agreed. That's why the strategy had to change with it. Adam looked at her. It was the first time either of them had spoken directly since she returned. Jenny moved to the next report. New Line would not shut down Golden Phoenix's sales operation. The company still had experienced people and valuable relationships. But the department would stop measuring growth mainly by how many new contracts it signed. Client retention, profitability, and long-term revenue would carry equal weight. Several services would be rebuilt around New Line's system. Accounts that had been sold more growth than their businesses could support would be reviewed first. Tom listened without interrupting. David asked questions about staffing and the existing account teams. Jenny answered them. Adam remained quiet until the end. And what happens to my position? The room stopped. Jenny closed the report. She had known the question would come. Every leadership position affected by the integration is being reviewed. Adam leaned back. Including mine, including yours. 3 years earlier, Adam had been given the department before he had proved he could lead it. Jenny was not going to make the same decision in reverse. She did not remove him because of what he had done to her. She also did not protect him from the results of what he had done to the company. His future at Golden Phoenix would be decided by the same thing Jenny had once asked the company to judge fairly: his work. The review took several weeks. Jenny and the new line team examined every major account, every leadership role, and every part of Golden Phoenix that would continue after the acquisition. Some employees were reassigned. A few positions were removed because the same work already existed inside New Line. Others were kept because they understood clients and markets New Line had never worked with before. David remained. He had made mistakes, including the one Jenny remembered most clearly, but the review showed that several parts of Golden Phoenix were still functioning because he had fought to protect them during the company's decline. His role changed. He would no longer have the same authority he once had, but Jenny believed he still had value. Adam's review was different. The numbers showed that the department had lost major clients, spent more to replace them, and continued pushing strategies that became less profitable each year. His position as head of client growth would not continue. Tom asked Jenny to reconsider. Not because he believed Adam's results justified the role, but because removing him immediately after the acquisition would make the decision look personal. Jenny looked at the same performance reports Golden Phoenix had used to judge everyone else. If his name wasn't Adam, would you be asking me this? Tom did not answer. Adam was offered a different position with less authority. He could stay and work under the new structure, or he could leave. He chose to stay. On the morning the changes were announced, Jenny walked through the client growth department and saw him at a desk outside the office that had once belonged to David. Adam looked up as she passed. Neither of them stopped. There was nothing left to argue about. The title he had been given had lasted 3 years. The results had decided what came after it. The first months after the acquisition were difficult. Golden Phoenix's problems did not disappear because Jenny had returned. Several clients were already close to leaving. Employees had spent years working under different priorities, and New Line's system could not simply be added to every account at once. Jenny began with the businesses Golden Phoenix was most likely to lose. The teams reviewed what each client was spending, how much revenue the work actually produced, and where customers were disappearing after the first sale. Some contracts were reduced instead of expanded. A few clients were told not to spend more money until existing problems were fixed. Golden Phoenix earned less from those accounts in the short term. Several executives questioned the decision. Jenny kept the changes in place. Within 6 months, the number of major clients leaving the company began to fall. Accounts that had been losing money under larger advertising campaigns became profitable again. New Line introduced its repeat revenue system to the businesses where the data showed the strongest opportunity. One regional client that had been preparing to leave expanded its contract after increasing revenue from existing customers by more than 20%. Another reduced customer acquisition spending while total sales continued to rise. By the end of the first year, Golden Phoenix had stopped shrinking. The following year, it grew again. Not every employee stayed. Not every old client returned. The company did not become successful because Jenny walked back through the door. It changed because the strategy changed. The numbers were finally allowed to matter, and the people producing results were given room to act on them. At the annual company meeting, Jenny stood in the same conference area where Adam's promotion had once been announced. She was not there to receive an award. She was presenting the results of the integration to employees from both companies. Golden Phoenix's client retention rate had reached its highest level in years. New Line had expanded into markets that would have taken much longer to enter alone. Together, the companies were producing more revenue than either had before the acquisition. When Jenny finished, the room applauded. She looked across the employees in front of her. David was there. Adam was there. Several of the coworkers who had once told her she would become department head were there too. Jenny did not mention what had happened 3 years earlier. She closed the report and moved to the next item on the agenda. Jenny had spent most of her life proving what she could do inside places she did not control. At New Line, that had finally changed. She no longer had to wait for someone else to give her credit, a title, or permission to use the full extent of her ability. She had found a place where the work she gave mattered, where the results could not be handed to someone else, and where what she helped build belonged to her too.